The warning proved true within a single solar year. It began at the edge of the galaxy, in a region of space so remote that no empire had ever claimed it. And at first the reports seemed like errors, sensor malfunctions, the kind of strange readings that could be dismissed as glitches. But the readings kept coming, and they kept getting worse. Stars were stopping, not exploding, not collapsing, not dying in any way that physics could explain. They were simply ceasing to function, their light frozen, their matter trapped in a state of dimensional amber that no instrument could penetrate. The phenomenon spread like a shadow moving across the face of the galaxy, consuming system after system, leaving nothing but darkness and silence in its wake. Admiral Voss stood on the observation deck of his flagship and watched the tactical display update with each new report, each red mark representing another star lost, another system gone dark. And he felt the cold weight of understanding settle into his scales. This was what the humans had warned them about. This was the threat from the deep layers of reality. And it was worse than anything he had imagined. The Empire's panicked ships fled from the advancing shadow. Refugees crowded into the inner systems. And the great fleets that had once seemed so powerful now looked like toys before a storm that could not be fought. Veth Dominion demanded that the humans do something, as if 3 centuries of dismissing humanity gave them the right to command. Now the Crystalline Accord retreated into their mathematics, trying to understand what was happening, their lights flickering with equations that had no solutions. The hegemony of Shal, humbled but not broken by their earlier defeat, offered their fleet to whatever defense might be organized, and the Prometheus answered. It was not alone this time, from the anomaly that had taken them 300 years ago. More ships emerged, hundreds of them, vessels that carried the descendants of Earth's first explorers, humans who had been born and raised in the spaces between dimensions, who had never known normal physics and did not fear what was coming. They called themselves the Terran Dimensional Navy, and their ships flickered between states of reality as they took positions alongside the combined fleet of the Empire's Admiral Chun, no longer just captain, stood on the bridge of the Prometheus and addressed the gathered forces through a communication network that spanned the galaxy. 300 years ago, humanity was a footnote, a primitive species taking its first steps into a universe we did not understand. The galaxy expected us to fail, expected us to fade away like so many other young races before us. She looked at the tactical display showing the advancing shadow, the darkness that threatened to consume everything. We found something worse than failure out there in the deep places. We found the things that live in the cracks of reality, beings older than stars, older than the laws of physics themselves. And we learned that we had 2 choices: adapt or die. Her voice strengthened with conviction. We adapted, we learned, we became something new. Not because we wanted power, but because survival demanded it. And now that threat has followed us here, to the galaxy we left behind, to the home we never forgot. Admiral Voss listened from his command chair, surrounded by officers who no longer sneered at human primitives. You wanted to know why human technology terrifies you, Chung continued. Because we learned fear first, we learned desperation. We learned that survival requires becoming something more than you were. Your empires grew comfortable behind your borders. Your people forgot what it meant to face extinction. Humanity never had that luxury. The human fleet moved into formation. Hundreds of ships that seemed to exist in multiple places at once. Weapons charged with energies that sang in frequencies no galactic instrument could detect. Today, we stop being your curiosity and become your shield. Today, the galaxy learns why humanity was never meant to be underestimated. The darkness pulsed, and something vast stirred within it, a presence that stretched across dimensions, a hunger that had consumed civilizations across countless realities. The Prometheus led the charge. It plunged into the shadow where no conventional ship could survive. And the rest of the human fleet followed, their vessels shifting through dimensional layers, engaging the threat in ways the watching empires could not fully perceive. Light erupted in the darkness. Strange colors that had no names, energies that rewrote the rules of space and time. And the stars that had been frozen began to move again. Admiral Voss gave orders to his own fleet, supporting the human advance as best they could. And across the galaxy, the other empires did the same. Veth and Crystalline and Shao, fighting alongside Earth's children against a common enemy. The battle lasted for days, measured in normal time, though those fighting in the dimensional layers experienced it very differently. Time and space becoming flexible weapons in a war that defied conventional understanding, and humanity won not easily. Not without loss, but they drove the darkness back, sealed the breach between realities, and saved a galaxy that had once dismissed them as irrelevant when the Prometheus emerged from the last dimensional fold. Battered but unbroken, the watching fleets erupted in cheers that crossed species boundaries. Admiral Chun stood on her bridge, exhausted but proud, and opened a final broadcast. The threat is contained, not destroyed forever, but sealed away where it cannot reach us. We will need to remain vigilant. We will need to work together to maintain the barriers. But today, we are safe. She smiled, and there was warmth in that smile. Love for the galaxy she had fought so hard to protect. Today, humanity has come home, not as the primitive species you remembered, but as partners, as allies, as friends. We have seen what lies beyond the edges of reality, and we choose to stand with you against it. Prime Speaker Vasquez's voice came through from Earth, trembling with emotion. Welcome home to all of you. The human fleet began its journey toward Earth, surrounded by escorts from every empire, honored instead of feared, respected instead of dismissed, and in the space where the shadow had been, the stars burned bright again. Their light carrying a message of hope across the galaxy. Humanity had returned, and they had brought something precious with them, not just technology, not just power, but the reminder that even the smallest species can rise to greatness when they refuse to give up. The empires had feared the wrong thing all along. The humans were never a threat. They were the galaxy's salvation. And they had been that since the very first moment a primitive vessel called the Prometheus had reached for the stars and refused to stop reaching. 300 years of survival, 300 years of learning, 300 years of becoming something greater. All of it had led to this moment, when humanity could finally stand among the stars and say with absolute truth, we belong here, we earned our place, and we will defend it with everything we have. The universe was vast and strange, and filled with wonders and terrors, beyond imagining, but humanity had learned to face both. And now the galaxy knew it too. The missing Earth ship had returned, and nothing would ever make the universe forget humanity again. The hegemony of Shao had not become one of the great powers by being cautious. Their empire had been built on strength and decisive action. And General Turk believed that waiting was the same as losing. He stood before the War Council of the hegemony, his scales gleaming with the medals of 100 victories, and made his case with the passion of a true warrior. The humans are a threat that must be eliminated, he declared. Today they speak of peace and friendship. But what happens when they decide they want our planets, our resources, our people? We cannot allow such power to exist unchecked. The council members shifted uncomfortably, Admiral Voss among them, disagreeing but politically unable to challenge Turk's influence. We have seen what they can do, Turk continued. And that was just a demonstration. Imagine what they could do if they truly wanted to destroy us. We must strike first while we still have the element of surprise. The vote was close, but Turk won, and within hours. 200 of the hegemony's finest warships broke away from the combined fleet and moved to surround the Prometheus. Captain Chun watched them come from her bridge, her expression sad rather than afraid. "They are targeting us with everything they have," Marcus reported from his station. "Weapons hot, shields at maximum. They seem to be preparing for a full assault." Yara sighed and shook her head. "I had hoped they would be wiser than this. I had hoped showing them our power would make them think twice about using force. Some beings only understand strength." Marcus replied, "They cannot imagine choosing peace when you have the power to wage war." The communication panel lit up with General Turk's message, broadcast on all frequencies so that the entire combined fleet could witness what he clearly expected to be a glorious victory. "Human vessel, you are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. This is your only warning." Yara stood and smoothed her uniform, then activated her own broadcast. "General Turk, I urge you to reconsider. We have no wish to harm you or your ships. But we will not surrender, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken prisoner." Turk's laugh echoed through the speakers. "Harsh and confident. You are one ship against 200. Your arrogance will be your doom." He gave the order, and 200 warships opened fire simultaneously. The space around the Prometheus erupted with light and energy, every weapon in the hegemony's arsenal blazing toward the small human vessel. Enough firepower to crack a planet into molten rubble. The watching fleets held their breath when the light faded. The Prometheus remained exactly where it had been. Completely untouched, the weapon's fire had curved away at the last moment, redirected into empty space, as if the ship existed slightly outside the reality where such things could harm it. Turk stared at his tactical display in disbelief. "Fire again," he ordered. "All weapons maximum power." They fired again, and again, and again, and each time the result was the same. The Prometheus simply could not be hit. The universe itself seemed to refuse to allow weapons to touch it. "Enough," Yara said quietly. And the Prometheus responded. It did not fire weapons of its own. It did not destroy any of the attacking ships. It simply adjusted something fundamental about the space around the hegemony fleet. Every engine in those 200 ships stopped working at the same instant. Not damaged, not destroyed, simply paused, their fundamental forces temporarily suspended. As if someone had reached into the heart of each vessel and pressed a pause button on physics itself. 200 warships drifted helplessly in space, their crews alive and unharmed, but completely unable to move or fight or escape. Yara's voice broadcast across all frequencies, calm and measured, despite what had just happened. "We did not come here to conquer. We came to offer partnership. But understand this clearly, we will not be caged. We will not be studied like animals. We will not be used." She paused, letting her words sink into the minds of every being listening. Humanity was underestimated once, when we were weak and primitive and reaching for the stars for the first time. We will not permit that to happen again. General Turk sat in his command chair, surrounded by dead controls and silent systems, and felt something he had never experienced in all his years of warfare. Complete and utter helplessness. The Prometheus released its hold on the hegemony fleet after several hours, restoring their engines without explanation. And the damaged pride of the Shell warriors led them to withdraw in humiliation. But the demonstration had been witnessed by the entire combined fleet, and the message was clear. The humans were not to be challenged with force. Ever the Veth Dominion, always more practical than proud, immediately opened secret negotiations with Captain Chung, seeking to understand how they might cooperate rather than conflict. The crystalline accord, driven by their endless hunger for knowledge, sent message after message requesting information about the places the humans had been, the mathematics they had learned, the secrets of reality they had uncovered. But it was Earth that responded most strongly to the news. For 300 years, the home world had been a minor power, dismissed and ignored by the great empires. struggling to find its place in a galaxy that did not seem to want it. Now the descendants of Earth's lost children had returned as something beyond gods, and the people of humanity's birthplace looked up at the stars with new hope. Prime Speaker Elena Vasquez was an old woman who had spent her entire career fighting for scraps of respect from empires that saw her world as primitive. And when she heard that the Prometheus had returned, she wept. Her message to Captain Chen was broadcast openly, not through diplomatic channels, but directly to the people of Earth and anyone else who cared to listen. 300 years ago, we sent our best and brightest into the unknown, and we thought we had lost them forever, but they survived. They endured. They became something greater than any of us could have imagined. Her voice cracked with emotion. And now they have come home, not as conquerors, not as threats, but as our children returning from a long journey. Whatever they have become, whatever they have learned, they are still ours. And we are so proud of them. Captain Chen listened to that message in her quarters, alone, and allowed herself to cry for the first time in longer than she could remember. Home. The word had seemed so abstract for so long, a concept rather than a place. But hearing the voice of Earth, feeling the love and pride and hope in those simple words, she remembered why she had fought so hard to return. Marcus found her there, wiping her eyes, and he understood without needing to ask. Earth is waiting for us, he said gently. I know, Yara replied, but we cannot go yet. The threat is still coming, and we need to prepare everyone for what is ahead. She straightened her shoulders and stood. Captain again, instead of the lost child who had finally found her way back. Contact the Veth and the Crystalline Accord. Tell them we accept their requests for negotiation, and send a message to Earth telling them we will come home soon. But first we have work to do. The galaxy was changing. The old order of empires and power was shifting to accommodate something new, and at the center of it all stood humanity. No longer the primitive newcomers reaching beyond their grasp. They had reached, and they had grasped something the galaxy had never imagined. Now they would teach everyone else what they had learned, whether the empires were ready for those lessons or not. The diplomatic chamber of Karath Station had hosted 1,000 important meetings over the centuries. Treaties that ended wars, alliances that shaped the galaxy, decisions that affected billions of lives, but it had never hosted anything like this. Captain Yara Chun walked into the chamber alone, wearing her simple gray uniform, looking small and almost fragile compared to the massive alien beings that surrounded her. Yet every eye in the room followed her with a mixture of fear and fascination. She took her seat at the central table and looked around at the representatives of the three great empires. Ambassador Cathral with his three suspicious faces, Admiral Voss with his warrior's posture, Prism of 7 angles flickering with mathematical uncertainty. "Thank you for meeting with me," she said in a voice that carried easily through the chamber. "I know you have many questions, and I will try to answer them honestly." Cathral leaned forward, his primary face twisted with barely controlled anger. "You can start by telling us what happened to your ship, where you have been for 300 years, and how you developed technology that makes our most advanced systems look like children's toys." Yara nodded, accepting the hostility without returning it. The Prometheus was caught in a spatial anomaly during our first jump. We did not know what we were flying into. Our instruments could not detect it. And by the time we realized something was wrong, it was too late. She paused, gathering memories that still hurt. Even after so many years, we were displaced. Not to another location in normal space, but to somewhere else entirely. A region where the laws of physics that you understand are merely suggestions, where reality itself is flexible and alive. Prism's light pulsed with sudden interest. "You are describing dimensional variance. Theoretical physics predicts such regions might exist, but no one has ever confirmed them." "They exist," Yara confirmed. "And they are not empty, There are things living there. Beings that have existed for longer than the galaxy has had stars. Civilizations that build with thought and exist across multiple states of reality at once. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. We should have died. Yara continued. 5,000 humans in a primitive ship, thrown into a place where the very concept of matter was uncertain. We had no right to survive, but you did survive, Voss said. His voice respectful despite the fear behind his eyes. Yara smiled, and there was pride in that smile. The fierce pride of a species that had refused to give up. Humans are stubborn. Admiral, we adapt, we learn. We keep fighting even when the universe tells us we should lie down and die. The beings in that place had never encountered anything like us. They expected us to break apart in moments, to dissolve like all organic matter does in those conditions. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Instead, we figured out how to stabilize our ship, how to protect our bodies, how to learn from the beings that surrounded us. It took generations. It cost us so much pain and loss that I cannot even describe it. But we did not give up. You learned their technology, Catherall said, understanding dawning on his faces. We learned more than technology. We learned a new way of understanding reality. Your empires see the universe as a fixed set of rules that cannot be changed. We learned that those rules are just the surface. Beneath them lies a deeper layer where anything is possible if you know how to ask. She turned back to face them. What you saw today. The demonstration with the moon that was not a weapon. It was simply us speaking the language of reality. We can do many things that would seem impossible to you. But we did not come here to threaten or conquer, Admiral. Voss finally asked the question that had been burning in his mind. Then why did you return? If you have found such power, why come back to this place where you were once ignored and dismissed? Yara's expression softened, and for a moment she looked like what she was. A woman who had been away from home for far too long, because Earth is still home, Admiral. Because our children and grandchildren sing songs about blue skies they have never seen. Because no matter how far we traveled or how much we changed, we are still human beings who want to stand on the soil where our species was born. She walked back to the table and sat down, her eyes moving from face to face. But there is another reason, a more urgent one. The atmosphere in the chamber shifted. The fear that had been present since the demonstration deepening into something worse. Something is coming, Yara said quietly. Something from the deep layers of reality. Something that makes your empires look like insects and makes us look merely small. We encountered it in the places between dimensions, and we barely escaped. Prism's light flickered rapidly. Processing this information. What kind of threat? We do not fully understand it, Yara admitted, even with everything we have learned. There are limits to what we know, but we know enough to be afraid. And we know that when it arrives, no single species or empire will be able to stand against it alone. She looked at Catherall. Then at Voss, then at Prism. We came back to warn you. To prepare you, and yes, to ask for your help. Because humanity alone cannot stop what is coming. We need allies. We need the combined strength of every species in this galaxy working together. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. For 300 years, these empires had competed and fought and treated each other as enemies. And now a returned human was asking them to set aside their differences and unite against a threat they could not even imagine. Thrall was the first to speak, and his voice was surprisingly gentle. You are asking us to trust you, to believe that you have come in peace despite possessing power that could destroy us all, and to prepare for a danger we cannot see or understand. Yes, Yara said simply. That is a great deal to ask from empires that once dismissed your species as worthless. Yara nodded. I know, and I know that we cannot force you to believe us. We can only show you what we have learned and hope that you will choose to stand with us. When the time comes, she reached into her uniform and pulled out a small device. Placing it on the table, this is a communicator that will allow you to contact us directly. No matter where we are, think about what I have told you. Discuss it among yourselves, and when you are ready to talk more, use this. She stood and walked toward the door. We will be waiting. We have become very good at waiting. As she left, the three empires sat in stunned silence, each processing what they had heard in their own way. Admiral Voss looked at the communicator on the table and wondered what kind of universe they truly lived in, and whether humanity had found the courage to face it honestly while the rest of them had been too comfortable to look. The stars outside the window seemed suddenly darker, and for the first time in his long career, Voss felt very small indeed. The neutral station of Kareth floated in the empty space between three great empires, a massive structure built centuries ago as a place where enemies could meet without weapons, where wars could be ended with words instead of fire. Now, it hosted the largest gathering of military force the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Voss of the hegemony of Shal stood at the observation window of his flagship and counted the vessels. 4,000 warships from 3 different empires. Enough firepower to crack a planet into rubble. All gathered because one small human ship had returned from the impossible. He did not like this situation at all. Prometheus hung motionless in space near the station, surrounded by the combined fleet, and Voss could not stop staring at it, his sharp eyes trying to make sense of a ship that seemed to exist in several states at once. His science officers had tried everything to understand the vessel. Every scanner and probe and analysis tool in their arsenal, and they had failed completely. The ship simply refused to be understood. We should destroy it now, said General Turk, his second in command. A warrior who had won 100 battles and who trusted nothing he could not kill. While we still can, Voss shook his head slowly. We do not know if we can, and besides, the Council has agreed to let the humans demonstrate their technology before any action is taken. We will wait. Waiting is dangerous, Turk growled. So is acting without information, Voss replied. I did not become an admiral by rushing into battles. I did not understand. The truth was that Voss felt something he rarely experienced. A deep and troubling fear that crawled through his scales like ice water, because his instincts told him that all 4,000 ships in this fleet were not enough, not nearly enough, to threaten the strange vessel that hung so quietly in space. He had spent his entire career studying military technology, learning the capabilities of every empire, understanding exactly how much force was needed to defeat any enemy, and for the first time in his life, he had no idea what he was dealing with. The communication panel chimed, and a message appeared from the Prometheus. We are ready to give our demonstration. Please direct your attention to the moon designated Kareth 7. We will show you something there. Voss watched as a single shuttle detached from the human ship, small and unremarkable, and began moving toward the barren moon that orbited the station. His tracking systems followed it carefully, recording every movement, every energy signature, trying to gather any data they could about human technology. Then the shuttle vanished. It did not accelerate beyond sensor range. It did not cloak itself with any technology Voss recognized. It simply ceased to exist in normal space. One moment it was there, and the next it was gone. What happened? He demanded. Where did it go? His science officer, a young female named Shen, worked frantically at her console, her claws clicking against the controls. I do not know. Admiral, there is no trail, no energy residue, no indication of where it went. It is as if the shuttle was never there at all. 3 seconds passed, then the moon began to scream. That was the only way Voss could describe it, because his sensors detected something that should have been impossible. The gravitational constant within the moon was changing, not its mass, not its density, but the fundamental force that held it together. The moon collapsed into itself like a dying star, shrinking to a fraction of its size. Then it expanded outward, reforming into its original shape. Then it collapsed again, cycling through states of matter that should not exist. Rock became liquid, became gas, became something that had no name, and then reformed back into rock over and over, as if the moon was being edited by a power that treated physics as a suggestion, rather than a Lawson's voice was barely a whisper. They are not destroying it, they are rewriting it. The shuttle reappeared beside the Prometheus as if it had never left, and the moon slowly stabilized back into its normal state, looking exactly as it had before, except that Voss knew it would never be the same. Not really. He felt his legs weaken beneath him and had to grip the railing to stay upright. "What are they?" Turk asked. And for the first time since Voss had known him, the general sounded afraid. Captain Chen's voice came through the communication system, calm and pleasant, as if she had just performed a simple trick instead of violating everything. Voss understood about reality. "We did not come here to threaten you. We came home. But you should understand that the universe is far stranger than your empires have imagined. And we have learned to speak its language. We would prefer to be friends." Voss turned away from the window and walked to the council chamber where the representatives of the three empires had gathered, his mind racing with implications he was not sure he could accept. The chamber was in chaos when he arrived. Ambassador Cathral of the Veth Dominion was shouting at his assistants, demanding explanations that none of them could provide, his three faces all showing different expressions of panic. The delegate from the crystal in the cord, a being of living mathematics named Prism of Seven Angles, sat motionless in its containment field, its light dimmed to almost nothing. Voss had seen crystalline beings react this way only once before, when they encountered mathematical concept that contradicted their fundamental understanding of existence. "What did your calculations show?" he asked Prism. Crystalline being's voice emerged as a series of harmonic tones that the translator converted to words. "They have achieved undimensional engineering. They are manipulating the substrate of reality itself. The mathematics required for what they just demonstrated should be impossible, should not be possible for any being that exists in normal space." Cathral finally stopped shouting and turned to face the others, his faces settling into expressions of grim determination. "We must contain them. If they can do this, they can do anything. They could collapse our planets, rewrite our people, destroy everything we have built. Can we contain them?" Voss asked. Already knowing the answer, no one responded, because they all knew the truth. A single human shuttle had just treated a moon like clay, and the entire combined fleet could not even track where it had gone. Containment was not an option. It had never been an option. They simply had not known it until now. Prism spoke again, and his voice carried a strange note that Voss eventually recognized as curiosity mixed with fear. "The question we should be asking is not what they can do to us. The question is why they have not already done it. They returned peacefully. They asked to come home. They offered friendship." Voss considered this carefully, his military mind working through the implications. If the humans wanted to conquer the galaxy, they would not need to negotiate. They could simply take whatever they wanted, and yet they had not. They had returned to the edge of known space and asked permission to come home. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we should listen to what they have to say." Cathral snarled in frustration, but he did not argue, because even his pride could not overcome the simple math of the situation. The humans held all the power, and they were choosing not to use it. That made them either the most trustworthy beings in the galaxy or the most dangerous. And Voss could not yet tell which. He sent a message to the Prometheus, inviting Captain Chun to the station for formal discussions, and tried not to think about what would happen if this meeting went wrong. The fate of empires now rested on the goodwill of a species they had ignored and dismissed for 300 years. And Voss could not help but wonder if they deserved that goodwill at all. The stars had forgotten about humanity, and the great empires of the galaxy had long stopped caring about the small blue planet at the edge of known space. 300 years ago, Earth had sent its first ship beyond the solar system, a vessel called the U.S. Prometheus, carrying 5,000 brave souls who dreamed of finding new worlds and proving that humanity belonged among the stars. Ship had vanished without a trace. The Veth Dominion, the Crystalline Accord, and the hegemony of Shal had watched with mild interest as the primitive humans launched their crude vessel into the void. And they had shrugged their many shoulders when it disappeared. Another failed species. Another footnote in galactic history. Earth mourned its lost children and continued to struggle, never quite rising to the level of the great powers, never quite earning respect in the councils of the galaxy, always seen as the newcomers who had reached far too fast. Ambassador Kethril of the Veth Dominion was reviewing trade reports in his office when his communication panel began to scream with alerts, and he nearly fell from his floating chair in surprise. Something had emerged from the galactic core. This was impossible. Of course, because the galactic core was a region of such intense gravitational chaos that no ship had ever returned from it. Not even the most advanced vessels of the oldest empires. And yet the sensors were clear. A ship was coming through. Kethril activated the visual display and felt his 3 hearts skip their rhythms when he saw it. A vessel that seemed to shimmer and shift like a dream trying to become real. Its hull existing in colors that his eyes could not properly process. The ship broadcast ancient identification codes that the computer struggled to recognize. And when it finally matched them to records 3 centuries old, Kethril had to sit down. The U.S. Prometheus was calling home. But this was not the same ship that had left Earth. That much was certain, because the original Prometheus had been a clumsy cylinder of metal and hope, primitive by galactic standards. And this vessel was something else entirely. The Dominion's most advanced sensors tried to scan it and failed, sliding off the hull as if the ship existed slightly outside of normal reality. Weapons targeting systems could not lock onto it, and even basic visual tracking seemed to lose focus when looking directly at it. Within hours, the news had spread across the galaxy, and every major power sent ships to intercept the mysterious vessel. Captain Yara Chun stood on the bridge of the Prometheus and watched the armada gather around their ship. Hundreds of alien warships from 3 different empires, all pointing their weapons at her and her crew. She was not afraid. The woman who had left Earth as a young lieutenant had changed in ways that the empires could not understand. And so had everyone else aboard the ship. 3 centuries of survival in places that defied normal physics had transformed them into something new. Her first officer, a tall man named Marcus, whose eyes sometimes reflected light that was not there, stepped up beside her. "They are hailing us on all frequencies," he reported, demanding identification and immediate surrender to inspection. Yara smiled, and there was something ancient in that smile, something that had seen wonders and horrors beyond the imagination of the beings now surrounding her ship. "Let them wait," she said calmly. "They have spent 300 years ignoring Earth. 300 years treating our home world as a backwater colony, not worth their attention. I think they can wait a few more minutes." Marcus nodded, understanding completely, because he remembered what it had been like before they fell into the anomaly. He remembered how the Veth had laughed at human diplomats, how the hegemony had refused to even acknowledge Earth's requests for trade partnerships, how the Crystalline Accord had called humanity a species of clever animals, not yet worthy of real contact. Those memories had kept them going through the long dark years in the spaces between dimensions. The determination to return and show the galaxy what humanity could become. The bridge crew worked silently at their stations, monitoring systems that the galactic empires did not know existed, tracking threats in dimensions that normal sensors could not perceive. The descendants of the original colonists mixed with those who had been born in the strange places where time and space did not behave. Probably a young woman named Li Wei, whose grandmother had been one of the original engineers on the Prometheus, looked up from her console with a worried expression. "Captain, the Hegemony flagship is charging weapons. They seem to be losing patience." Yara waved her hand dismissively. "Their weapons cannot touch us. You know this." "Yes, but they do not know it yet. And I am concerned about what will happen when they try." This was a good point, and Yara considered it carefully, because the whole purpose of this return was to build bridges with the galaxy, not to terrify the empires into hostile action. She had seen enough conflict in the deep places, enough beings destroyed by fear and misunderstanding, and she did not want to start a war with the galaxy on her first day back. Open a channel, she decided. All frequencies, all empires. The communication officer, an elderly man who had been a child when the ship first fell into the anomaly, activated the systems. "Channel open, Captain." Yara straightened her uniform, a simple gray suit that bore no resemblance to the flashy outfits favored by galactic leaders, and spoke in a clear voice. "This is Captain Yara Chun of the U.S. Prometheus. We have been away for a very long time, and we understand that our sudden return must be confusing and frightening. We mean no harm to anyone." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "We have traveled to places your empires have never imagined. We have learned things that will change how you understand the universe. And we have returned because Earth is our home. No matter how far we traveled or how much we changed, the Armada held its position. Weapons still trained on the Prometheus, but no one fired." Ambassador Kethral's voice came through the speakers, sharp with suspicion and barely hidden fear. "You claim to be the lost Earth vessel, but that ship was primitive, and you are something else entirely. What happened to you? What are you?" Yara looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. And then she answered the question that would change everything. "We are still human, Ambassador. We are the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the people who left Earth 300 years ago. But the universe is much stranger than your empires have ever realized. And we have learned to speak its language." She let that sink in for a moment before continuing. "We would like to come home now, if you will let us, and we would like to share what we have learned, but we will not be treated as prisoners or subjects or threats. We are not here to conquer anyone." The silence stretched across the void between ships, across the gulf of understanding between humanity and the empires that had dismissed them finally. Kethral spoke again, and his voice was quieter now, touched with something that might have been respect or might have been fear. "The Combined Council will need to discuss this. Please maintain your position and await further instructions." Yara nodded. Even though he could not see her, "We will wait. We have become very good at waiting." She cut the channel and turned to her crew with a warm smile. "Well done, everyone. The first contact is complete. Now the real work begins." Through the view screen, the stars that had forgotten humanity glittered with cold light, but aboard the Prometheus, there was warmth and hope and the determination that had carried these people through 3 centuries of impossible survival. They were home, and nothing would ever be the same again.